The photographer was counting down when my 5-year-old son made his choice out loud. He tightened his small arms around my sister's waist like she was a life raft, lifted his chin and said with a chilly certainty that didn't belong in a child's mouth, "I don't want to stand next to Mum. I want to stand with Aunt Lana." I took one step closer, still wearing that polite smile women learn to paste on for family occasions. He immediately shifted away from me, guarding himself with her body, clinging to her like she was the only safe place left in the world. My sister, Lana Song, didn't look triumphant. She didn't need to. Her hands rested on his shoulders with a tenderness that felt rehearsed, her voice soft enough to sound like an apology. "It's okay," she murmured, as if she were calming a frightened pet. "Come here, sweetheart." My husband, Adrian Lin, didn't correct him. He didn't even blink. He simply adjusted his suit cuff and angled his body slightly toward Lana, as if the camera had finally captured what he considered the correct arrangement. Click. The flash went off like a tiny execution. Later, the photo was printed, framed, and hung right in the center of our living room, like a trophy. In the picture, Adrian stood beside Lana, and my son, Leo Lin, sat comfortably in her arms. The three of them leaned toward the lens, smiling with that effortless glow people have when they believe they're where they belong. And me, I was on the far edge of the frame, half pushed into the background. My smile pulled tight and thin like a stranger who wandered in by mistake and didn't know where to put her hands. That night, I stood alone in front of that picture and listened to the house breathe. The air conditioning hummed, the expensive clock ticked. Somewhere down the hall, my son laughed at something Lana said, and the sound slid under my skin like a splinter. The next morning, I placed the divorce papers on Adrian's desk. He looked at them the way a CEO looks at a bad quarterly report. Brow furrowed, mild irritation, confusion that something so manageable had become inconvenient. "Divorce?" he repeated, as if the word were in a foreign language. Over something this small, his tone was negotiation, not heartbreak, a businessman trying to salvage a deal. I met his eyes. I didn't lower my voice. I didn't soften the truth to make it easier to swallow. "Yes," I said, "because of this. Because a 5-year-old looked at his own mother like I was a threat. Because the first family photo we ever took had my husband standing next to another woman, and no one found it strange. Because sometimes the thing that wakes you up isn't a tragedy. Sometimes it's a small moment that finally proves the nightmare was real. The day we signed the divorce agreement, we were both calm. No crying, no shouting, no dramatic speeches. It felt like two partners closing out a failed venture with clean jumpshunhut, hands and colder hearts. He kept the company shares. I took the cash from the stock and options. He kept 3 Manhattan apartments because he liked collecting addresses the way other men collected watches. I kept the coastal villa in Australia because I needed one thing that belonged to me and didn't remember his voice. We split 2 estates in England and the vineyard in France like accountants dividing columns, our signatures gliding across paper like knives through silk. We had amassed a ridiculous amount during our marriage, yet compared to the Lin and Song families, it was still just glittering numbers in reports. Nobody on either side lost sleep over it. Only one item took time: custody. Leo was 5, but he understood power the way some children understand weather. He ran straight to Adrian and latched onto his leg, wrapping his arms around it like a chain. "I'm going with Dad," he shouted, loud enough to echo. Then he looked back at me, eyes dark and sharp. There was no trust there, not even confusion, only alertness, the way you watch a dog you're not sure won't bite. It hit me with an almost physical force. That wasn't the look a child gave his mother. That was the look you gave a stranger in an alley. I let out a laugh that tasted like metal. Adrian paused, clearly expecting me to fight. His posture shifted into readiness, like he was about to defend his asset. "Let Leo stay with me," he said, smoothing his voice into something that sounded reasonable. He's a Lynn. My family can give him a better life, and you heard him. He doesn't want to be with you. Don't worry, Lana is your sister. She's his aunt. She'll take good care of him. If you insist on— When did I say I wanted custody? I cut in. My own calmness surprised me. Silence pooled in the room. Adrian stared. Even Leo lifted his head, startled, as if I had broken a rule he didn't know could be broken. Leo is your son, Adrian said slowly, suspicion creeping into his face. You're really willing to give him up? I looked at my child. He was dressed in a designer outfit Lana had bought, the kind of soft, expensive fabric that made him look like he'd been born in a penthouse with a silver spoon already in his mouth. He kept staring at me, waiting for the version of me he had learned to predict, the desperate mother, the woman who begs. But I wasn't begging anymore. I'm giving up custody voluntarily, I said, and I won't contest it later. A sentence that weighed almost nothing as it left my lips, and yet it ended something enormous. After the divorce, I moved out fast. No dramatic last walk through the villa. No lingering by the marble staircase. I packed my essentials and disappeared into an apartment I'd bought with my own money, earned from years of painting when no one was watching. It was small, just over 80 square meters, white walls, a narrow balcony that fit a folding table and 2 potted plants. No floor-to-ceiling windows, no skyline like a jeweled galaxy, and for the first time in years I could breathe. I had always thought leaving Adrian would feel like tearing flesh from bone. Instead, it felt like removing a cold collar that had been tightening around my throat for so long I had started calling it normal. In Adrian's eyes, our marriage had always been an alliance, a contract stitched together with family names and benefits. No romance, no tenderness, just terms. But there was one truth he never knew. Before I ever became Mrs. Lynn, before my life was rearranged like furniture in someone else's mansion, I had loved him, and that was the cruelest part. Not that I lost him, that I woke up and realized I had been alone the entire time. I hadn't even opened my mouth when my birth mother rushed in, clutching her chest as if someone had plunged a blade between her ribs. "What are you saying, Lana?" she cried, voice trembling with practiced heartbreak. "We're a family. Don't talk like you're an outsider. You're only worried she's upset, aren't you? You can tell she's not comfortable." Before she could finish, Adrian's expression darkened. His tone dropped into that cold, executive register I'd learned to fear more than yelling. "If anyone's uncomfortable, it's because they're being petty," he said. Lana went out of her way to throw Leo a birthday. How is that a problem? Lana pressed her lips together, stood slowly, chair legs scraping the floor like a warning. She looked down at her hands as if they were suddenly too empty to carry her pride. "Maybe I should leave," she said softly. Then she let out a bitter little laugh, as if the words hurt her tongue. "After all, I'm not even your real daughter. You're the real family. If I'm not welcome, that's only natural." My mother lunged forward and grabbed her wrist as though she were holding her back from stepping off a cliff. "Don't say that," she sobbed. "If you're not my daughter, then what are you? In my heart, you've always been my biological child. Have I ever treated you differently?" Then she turned on me so fast it stole the air from my lungs. Her eyes sharpened, the softness burning away like paper in flame. "And you," she said, the accusation plain on her face. "Your sister has good intentions. She came to celebrate Leo. Why are you acting like this? On a happy day, why do you have to make things tense?" Adrian's gaze followed, heavy and annoyed, like I'd spilled ink on a white tablecloth. "Everyone was having a good time," he said. "Why did you have to drag the mood down? Why did you come home early?" I opened my mouth to explain, to say I'd just been discharged, to say the incision still stung every time I breathed too deeply, to say I hadn't eaten anything but bland hospital soup for 2 days, because I'd wanted to be here, because I still believed Mother's presence mattered. But before I could get even one word out, Leo ran forward and latched onto Lana's leg like a barnacle, tiny arms locked tight. "I don't want Aunt Lana to go," he screamed. Then he whipped around and glared at me with a fury a 5-year-old should not know how to summon. "I hate Mum," he shouted. "If anyone has to leave, Mum should." His eyes should have been clear and innocent. Instead, there was something inside them that was sharp, cruel, almost deliberate. "It's Mum's fault Aunt Lana is sad," he said, voice rising higher, uglier. "Why did Mum get better so fast? If Mum stayed in the hospital, she wouldn't have come back." Every word stabbed straight through my ribs. I stood in the living room like a ghost that hadn't realized it was dead. I stared at the child I'd nearly bled out bringing into this world, the child I'd loved in thousands of small ways, the one I'd fed and bathed and rocked through fevers, the one I'd kissed goodnight even when his father wouldn't look at me. My hands went cold. My mind went blank. My heart felt like someone had scooped a hollow into it and left it open to the air. And the most absurd part was this. I hadn't done anything. I hadn't told Lana to leave. I hadn't accused anyone. I hadn't even said I was tired. Yet every pair of eyes in that room turned toward me with displeasure, with blame, as if I were the one who had ruined the party and wounded their precious first daughter. They stood behind Lana, protecting her feelings, protecting her performance. No one stood behind me. A few minutes later, when the laughter started up again, when the birthday song resumed as if the knife in my chest was just background music, I rose quietly, reached for the suitcase I hadn't even unpacked, and walked toward the door. As I passed Lana, I leaned in and spoke so softly only she could hear. "Stop acting," I said, my voice strange in my own, ears calm as still water. "I'm leaving. We didn't hide the divorce from the family." A few hours after I left the Lynn Villa, my mother called, voice tight with outrage. "Over something so small, you want a divorce?" she demanded. "Marriage isn't a game. Have you thought about the child? Are you really willing to let him grow up without a mother?" I leaned my back against the cold wall of my small apartment and looked out at the city lights. Distant and indifferent. "He already has the mother he loves most," I said. "Aunt Lana, he'll be very happy." She scoffed, words dripping with contempt. "You've always been stubborn, extreme. Your adoptive parents must have raised you wrong." "Enough," I cut in, still steady, still quiet. "Who are you performing for now, Mum?" Silence. I could hear her breathing hard on the other end, like she'd been caught mid-act without a script. "Ever since Lana woke up," I said, "you've been trying to push her back toward Adrian. Don't pretend. You've wanted me out of the way so she could take my place properly." Her voice jumped, panicked. "What are you talking about? You're both my daughters. I don't favour either of you." I didn't have the energy to fight a lie that had been rehearsed for years. "Don't worry," I said, my tone flat. "After I divorce Adrian, he'll marry Lana. Your business alliance won't suffer, and I won't take a single cent from the Song family. Pretend you never found me." She started to speak again, frantic, but I ended the call. Then, while my hands were still calm enough to obey me, I blocked her number before she could call back. By that point, there was nothing left to say. I resigned from my job, sold a few valuable things I no longer wanted to look at, booked a flight to Kenya with a kind of clarity that felt like stepping into sunlight after years underground. For years, my entire life had revolved around Adrian, around Leo, around the Lynn name and the Song name and the suffocating walls of their expectations. Now, the first thing I wanted was distance. On the plane, the seat beside mine was taken by a young man with a magazine cover face and nervous hands. Silk blue shirt, 2 buttons undone, collarbone sharp under cabin light, a smile too polite to be careless. When turbulence hit, the aircraft bucked hard enough to jolt my stomach, and the seatbelt sign flickered like a warning. I felt unease, but not fear. After what I'd survived, the sky had nothing on the ground. The young man went pale. His lips lost their colour. His fingers trembled as he turned to me. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Could I hold your hand? I don't mean anything wrong. I'm terrified of heights." His eyes were wide with contained panic, embarrassed and sincere at the same time. I looked at him for a heartbeat, then offered my hand. "Okay," I said. He held on like my palm was the only stable thing in the world. When the plane finally steadied or tried to pull back, needing the restroom, he released me instantly, flustered, ears turning red. "I'm so sorry," he blurted. I waved it off, a small smile tugging at my mouth. "It's fine." When we landed, I barely had time to hear him thank me before the crowd surged and carried me away. That night, under a sky scattered with stars near Kilimanjaro, I sat outside my tent and stared up at the Milky Way like it was a doorway. For the first time, I understood something simple and brutal. The world was vast, and the Lin family, the Song family, Adrian, Leo, Lana, they were only a tiny corner of my life. The next morning, the hotel told me another guest would share my safari route. I stepped outside, and there he was, the young man from the plane, leaning against a jeep in a cowboy hat, grinning like sunlight had learned his name. "What a coincidence," he called, waving. "We meet again." And in that moment, with the savannah stretching wide behind him, I felt the faintest crack in the cage I'd lived in for years. Not love, not yet, just possibility. In that moment, I wanted to listen to my heart for once. Just once. Not for anyone, not for duty, not for the performance of a good wife, not for the role of the reasonable daughter, only for me. So what if it was freedom? So what if it looked like recklessness? At least in that single breath of time, I wasn't the wife people criticised, or the mother a child could despise, or the Song family's returned daughter who had to be grateful and obedient. I was Mira Song, a tired woman who deserved 1 second where she didn't have to hold herself together. I kissed him like I was cutting a cord. For a heartbeat, I thought I was the one pulling him into it. Then the balance shifted. Fingu tightened his grip around my wrist, pulled me closer, and kissed me back with a heat that startled me. His mouth tasted of red wine and something sweeter, and his restraint burned away so quickly it felt like fire racing across dry grass. Outside, the savannah sky cracked open. Rain slammed onto the canvas roof in a sudden roar. Wind whipped the tent walls so hard the fabric snapped and shuddered like it might tear. Thunder rolled in the distance, deep and violent, as if the whole world had turned over just to hide us from ourselves. The darkness beyond the tent was absolute. Inside there was only our breath, our hands, the frantic need to find warmth in another body when everything else felt cold. When we finally broke apart, my lips tingled. My pulse was loud enough to drown out the storm. Finn rested his forehead against mine, eyes half-lidded, voice rough. "You're real," he murmured, like he'd been afraid I was a mirage. I didn't answer. I didn't want to name it. If I named it, it would become something I could lose. The next days slipped past faster than I expected. 10, 12, 14 mornings. The kind of travel time that doesn't feel like travel at all after a while, but like a life you've been living quietly for years. I got used to Finn knocking on my door with breakfast and an over-dramatic complaint about my sleeping like royalty. I got used to him lecturing me at lunch about angles and lighting, moving me by the shoulders so gently it felt intimate, even when it was innocent. I got used to nights under open skies, listening to him talk about getting lost in South America, his voice steady and warm, like a campfire you could lean toward without burning. And then, just like that, it was time to leave. On the morning I was headed to the airport, Finn stood in front of the hotel with his fingers wrapped tightly around mine, as if his grip alone could delay the world. "I'm going to Tanzania next," he said, eyes bright. almost boyish in his hope. "Come with me. I'll handle everything. You just follow me." For a second, I wanted to say yes so badly it made my throat ache. Then I smiled and shook my head. "I've been wild enough," I said softly. "It's time for me to pull myself back in a little." His smile faltered. He lowered his voice like he was testing an invisible boundary. "Then, when you're back, can I find you?" I didn't answer. I only lifted my hand in a small wave and turned away before my face could betray me, because the truth was cruel in its simplicity. I did like him. Who wouldn't like a young man with sunlight in his laughter, with beauty that didn't even try to be modest, with a kind of attention that made you feel seen instead of evaluated? Beside him, I felt lighter, younger, like I had permission to laugh out loud again. But there was a distance between us I couldn't pretend not to understand. The distance between a passing wind and a lifetime. This fever of freedom, I chose to keep it as a dream, a beautiful illusion that arrived at the exact moment I needed it to cut loose from my past. And like every dream, waking up meant I still had to walk forward alone. I had already failed disastrously once in love. I wasn't ready to gamble my whole future on another warm feeling. The moment I landed, my phone vibrated like it was trying to shake itself apart. Missed calls, all from the same number. Before I even dragged my suitcase out of baggage claim, the screen lit up again. Adrian Lynn. I stared at his name for half a second too long, then answered. "Mira." His voice came through strained and exhausted, threaded with something that sounded like panic. "Leo, something happened. He's at Central Hospital. Can you come?" My heart tightened. In a reflex I hated, I had given up custody. I had told myself I was done. I had repeated it like a spell, but the image of a child in a hospital bed still reached into my body and pulled me forward without asking permission. I went. In the hospital room, Leo looked impossibly small under the white blanket. His cheeks were flushed with fever, lashes trembling against his skin. An IV line ran into his arm, clear liquid dripping steadily, one drop at a time, like a clock counting down. "What happened?" I asked, turning toward Adrian. The pain in my chest wasn't sharp anymore. It was older than that now. A bruise you don't notice until someone presses it. Adrian's jaw was tight. For the first time, his face carried regret mixed with anger. "I had to entertain clients," he said hoarsely. "A project, late nights. I left Leo with Lana. She promised she'd watch him, but when he got sick, she went to some high-end fashion show. I didn't know. The nanny found him in time and called an ambulance." I looked at him and let out a humorless breath. "You told me she would take very good care of him." Adrian didn't answer. He couldn't. The door opened. Lana Song walked in wearing a designer dress that still carried the faint scent of expensive perfume. The moment she saw Leo, her face went pale, but she recovered quickly, stepping straight to Adrian, voice urgent, practiced. "Adrian, listen to me. I didn't know Leo was sick. If I had known, I wouldn't have gone. The second I heard, I left everything and came here." Adrian's eyes went cold. "Since you walked in, you've only been explaining yourself," he said. "Why haven't you asked how Leo is?" Lana froze, mouth parting, words caught on air. Adrian's lips curved into a thin, mocking smile. "He woke up for a few minutes earlier," he said slowly. "Do you know what he said first? He said he told you he didn't feel well. You asked if he wanted cake, said you'd go buy some, and then you disappeared. Lana, is that your version of taking care of him?" "It's not," Lana snapped, her voice rising. "He's a child. He's just saying things. He's lying." A weak voice cut through the room. I'm not lying." Leo's eyes opened, dry and exhausted. His voice was hoarse, pitiful, but his gaze was strange, not clingy, not worshipful. There was a cold clarity there that didn't belong to his age. "I told Aunt Lana I felt bad," he repeated. "She asked if I wanted cake. She said she'd buy it, but she didn't come back. Then he said very quietly, like he'd been collecting these thoughts in the dark, I know she wants to have another baby for Dad. I know she hates me because I'm in the way. His eyes flicked to Lana, sharp as glass. She wants me gone, right? Lana's face flushed, shame and panic colliding. She rushed to the bed, tried to grab his hand. Sweetheart, don't be silly. Auntie didn't mean that. I didn't know you were that sick. You like cake, right? I'll buy you the biggest one. Leo pulled his hand away and turned his face to the wall. I left the room quietly and stepped into the hallway to ask the nurse for details. Outside, the Lynn family nanny stood there. She'd been in that house for years. If anyone in that world had ever shown me basic respect, it was her. When she saw me, she sighed. Mom, she said softly, the little master is pitiful. He's young. He thinks whoever spoils him is good, but no one is like a real mother. What happened? I asked. How did it turn into this? The nanny glanced toward the room, then lowered her voice. I don't want to speak ill of Miss Lana, she said carefully, but before, she was kind to him because she wanted Mr. Lynn's favour. She hesitated, then continued. After you left, she started getting colder. Sometimes he runs to her and she won't even smile. The other day, I heard her tell Mr. Lynn she wants a child of her own. And you know how it is, Mom. Few people truly love someone else's child. Once she has her own baby, where will Leo stand in that house? Her voice dropped to a near whisper. And this time, I truly suspect she left him on purpose. Because if she has her own child, the little master becomes an obstacle. She stopped abruptly, realizing how dangerous those words were. Maybe I'm thinking too much, she added quickly, eyes full of apology. When I returned to the room, Leo's fever had come down a little. The doctor said it wasn't serious because they'd gotten him there in time. With rest, he'd recover. I sat beside the bed for a while without speaking. Then I stood to leave. Mum. His voice was small, weak, tugging at my ankle like a thread. Leo lay alone under the white blanket, looking abandoned for the first time in his life. He reached out toward me, eyes wet, like a puppy that didn't understand why it was being left behind. Can you stay a little? He whispered. I miss you. For a moment, he looked so heartbreakingly young that my chest softened, but something inside me remained quiet. A memory rose, clear as a photograph. His arms around Lana, his angry face, his voice shouting that I should be the one to leave, that he hated me, that if I hadn't gotten better, I wouldn't have come back. Rest, I said gently. I have to go. I didn't know what else to say. Behind me, I heard a small, broken sound, not words, just the helplessness of tears. Outside the room, Adrian followed me. Mira, he said, voice tired in a way that sounded like defeat. I've thought about everything. He stood in front of me, looking older than I remembered, dark circles under his eyes. I was wrong, he said. You know, Lana and I were always together before. When you appeared, I didn't adapt. But I've figured it out now. We're married. We have Leo. We weren't always unhappy. He needs a complete family. He looked at me, voice low. Come back. Please. I stared at him and felt something close to laughter rise in my throat. When I fought for that family, he despised me. He crushed me. He chose another woman and made my dignity something to step on. Now that I had left, now that my life was no longer convenient for him, he wanted to figure it out. Was that what people were? Only recognizing the value of what they called obvious after it disappeared? Or was it simpler than that? Maybe he'd just realized how easy his life had been when I was doing the quiet work no one thanked. I didn't answer. I turned and walked away. My biggest regret in this life, I said, the laugh that left my throat sounding like ice cracking, is that I ever loved you. Now just looking at you makes me feel sick. Get out, and don't ever show your face in front of me again. Adrian Lynn went rigid, as if my words had slapped him harder than any hand could. Hurt flickered in his eyes, quick and startled. Then he lunged for an excuse like a man reaching for air. Mira, I know I was wrong. I know I hurt you, but I can change. I will. Fingu stepped forward at last. All the playful sulking, the exaggerated pouting, the teasing warmth he wore around me like sunlight, vanished. He stood between Adrian and me, tall and solid, voice flat as steel. My girlfriend just told you to leave, he said. Did you not hear her? Only then did people remember Finn wasn't just pretty. He was almost 6'2", shoulders broad under that soft shirt, his presence filling the doorway until Adrian looked, for the first time in his life, like someone who could be pushed back. I reached for Finn's hand and held it, calm enough to surprise even me. Adrian, I said, I have a new love. Please stop haunting my life. He stared at our linked fingers for a long moment. When he looked back at me, his eyes were red at the rims, as if he'd been fighting sleep for days and losing. Okay, he rasped. Mira, I won't bother you anymore. Then he turned and walked away, steps unsteady, like he'd forgotten how to carry his own weight. A few days later, a friend told me Lana Song was pregnant. She posted a picture of the test results on social media with a caption so sweet it made my teeth ache. A child of love. I thought I would feel something, rage, bitterness, a familiar humiliation. Instead, I felt nothing at all, like the part of me that used to bleed for them had finally closed. Then summer began to end, and my body betrayed me in a different way. It started with nausea I blamed on irregular meals, but when my period didn't come, when the calendar kept turning and my chest kept tightening, I went to a pharmacy with shaking hands and bought a pregnancy test. 2 bright lines appeared. I sat down hard on the couch, staring until my vision blurred. We had been careful. We were always careful, except that one night, too much wine, too much laughter, too much warmth, and a reckless softness I hadn't let myself feel in years. I'd counted the days afterward, clinging to the idea of safe, and yet, when Finn found out, he froze for 2 seconds. Then he wrapped me in his arms, lifted me off the floor like I weighed nothing, and spun me in the middle of the living room, laughing like a lunatic until his cheeks went red and his eyes went shiny. I knew it, he muttered, pacing in frantic circles like a delighted moth trapped in a lamp. Wedding suit, wedding dress, do we do the beach or mountains? How many guests? Wait, do we invite your ex? No, absolutely not. Hospital first. We drank that night. God, we have to check everything. I watched him whirl around, my mind still lagging behind reality. Then my hand drifted to my stomach, instinctive, protective, and my gaze dimmed without permission. Finn stopped mid-step. The smile on his mouth faltered, his voice dropped, careful now, as if he was approaching an animal that might bolt. You're not thinking about ending it, he said. Are you? I didn't answer, because I didn't know. Once, I had carried a child with a whole universe of hope. I had believed love was something you could grow by giving enough of yourself, and the child I nearly died to bring into the world had looked me in the eyes and wished I'd stayed sick, wished I'd never come back. If I gave birth again, and fate handed me that same blade in a different shape, would I survive it? Finn seemed to understand without me saying a word. He came closer, slowly, knelt in front of me, and placed his palm over my belly like a promise. I'll respect whatever you decide, he said quietly. If you don't want to keep the baby, I'll be heartbroken, but I'll still stand with you. He swallowed, then added with dead serious conviction, but if you do keep our child, I'm telling you now, our kid is not going to grow up ungrateful. If they ever make you cry, I'll ground them for a century. A laugh broke out of me before I could stop it, and with it, tears I hadn't invited. Don't say ridiculous things, I sniffed. Who threatens a baby like that? I'm not threatening, he said solemnly. I'm declaring, policy. Something heavy in my chest loosened, one notch at a time. First, I said, wiping my face, we go to the hospital. The doctor confirmed it. Healthy, stable, no problems. Finn looked so relieved he nearly hugged the doctor. On the way home, he bought bags of fruit and milk like we were preparing for a siege. Watching him glow, watching him treat my body like something sacred instead of convenient, I felt calmer than I had in months. Maybe this baby would not be like Leo. Maybe this child would be born from love, not from obligation or a transaction dressed up as marriage. I was about to tell Finn that, about to say something brave and real. My phone rang. "Hello, this is City Police," a man said. "Are you Leo Lynn's mother?" My stomach dropped. Then the next sentence froze my blood. "Leo has been kidnapped. Please come to Sky Road Tower, Building B, immediately." When I arrived, the rooftop wind tore at my hair. From far away, I could already hear screaming. Adrian was there, facing Lana. Lana's hair was wild, makeup smeared into dark streaks, her eyes red and feral. She had Leo pinned against her chest, one arm locked around his neck, a knife pressed to his throat, silver and shaking. "Back off!" she shrieked. "Tonight I'm killing this brat!" My mother collapsed nearby, sobbing into her hands. I grabbed her sleeve, my whole body trembling. What happened? Why is she doing this? Between broken breaths, the story spilled out. After I left, Lana stopped pretending to care about Leo. She wanted a child of her own, wanted to replace him, wanted a new heir that would push him out of the house. Adrian refused. The fights escalated. In the chaos, Lana's pregnancy became her weapon, and then Adrian lifted a sheet of paper in his hand, voice colder than the wind. "I did a DNA test," he said. "That baby wasn't mine." Lana went still. Adrian's gaze cut over my mother like a blade. The father was the song. Family driver. Lana's face twisted into something inhuman. "So what?" she laughed, sharp and broken. "If you'd given me a child, I wouldn't have had to sleep with him." Her eyes found me, burning. "This was all supposed to be mine. He was supposed to be mine. The marriage was supposed to be mine. And you ruined everything. So I'll make you watch your son die." Leo's eyes were huge with terror. A thin line of blood appeared where the knife kissed his skin. "Mom!" he sobbed, reaching toward me. "Mom, save me!" Adrian moved in a blur. Lana's attention snapped to me for one fatal second. Her grip loosened, and Adrian yanked Leo free. But Lana lunged, wild with despair, and drove the knife forward. The white of Adrian's shirt bloomed red. Police rushed in. Lana was dragged away, screaming. Adrian collapsed, blood spreading like a terrible flower. Hours later, outside the operating room, the doctor wiped sweat from his forehead. "The blade missed his heart by less than an inch," he said. "He's alive, but he's not out of danger. We're moving him to intensive care." Leo sat on the bench, legs dangling, face as pale as paper. He hadn't spoken since the rooftop. He stared at the floor like his soul had stepped out of his body and forgotten the way back. Finn stood beside me, holding my hand so tightly it hurt. But he said nothing. There was nothing safe to say. I walked to Leo and sat down. Then, slowly, I pulled him into my arms. He was freezing. He shook in the small, violent bursts. For a long time he fought it. Then the child in him finally broke through the shock, and he began to sob, loud and helpless, like someone drowning and finally admitting they couldn't breathe. "Mom," he choked, clinging to my shirt. "I was so scared. I didn't mean to push her. She said she'd throw me out. I thought I'd lose everything." His voice splintered. "Mom, please come back. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I miss you." I held him tighter, staring at the sterile white walls, feeling the old wound ache but not bleed. "It's okay," I whispered, not because it was, but because he needed one adult in his life to say something gentle. I know.